Because if we want to get a little bit better at speaking every day, every episode, every speech, every coaching call, every social media post, whatever it is, we have to practice the things that are holding us back from improving. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode number 58, Why Your Offers Aren't Working. I pivoted again. I did it again to you all. Today for episode number 59, 2 speaking tips you can start practicing now. Also, just a heads up, I do have a fan going in the background, so if there's any background noise, that is my fan. It is very, very hot in New England right now, and the studio is quite warm. 2 speaking tips you can start practicing now. It'd be nice if I could speak. I oftentimes go on other podcasts, and when I do, I get asked, hey, do you have any feedback? And I don't usually like to give feedback to people right after the podcast episode, so sometimes I'll do that on a free podcast breakthrough session. It can just get weird sometimes. I don't know how much feedback the person really wants. I don't know how into growth they are. I don't know how new they are or how much they've been practicing, so I do like to know somebody at a deeper level before I give them feedback, but that is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about today. Okay, so one thing I give for feedback, and really think about if you do this. I did this heavily in the beginning when we used to do a lot of interviews. When you ask somebody a question or somebody says something to you, it doesn't necessarily have to be the answer to a question. Your first tendency, without even thinking about it, is to say, I love that, or that's amazing, or that's great, or I like that, or that sounds really good. These are responses that are not thought through. These are fillers, is really what they are. I used to do that a ton. Anytime a guest would answer a question, I would say, I love that, because I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know how to transition to the next question. I didn't know how to, what I call now, pulling the string. I didn't know how to pull the string to go deeper on that question that I had asked. It was just an unconscious response to get me out of discomfort. My question for you is, what is your filler word? What is your filler statement? What is your transition term? Because that's really what it is. Say you ask somebody a question and they give you an answer. Rather than holding silence for a second and thinking about the follow-up, you fill it with, I love that. Then you throw something else in there. Is it a huge deal? No, but having a stronger level of conversational agility is going to benefit you in the long run. The other reason is, eventually when you start going on shows and you're a guest, you're going to have something on that end too, where maybe when somebody asks you a question, you say, that's a really great question, boom. You're either buying yourself time or you're avoiding the discomfort of just sitting there thinking about it. I do that occasionally, but it's very conscious now when I'm on other shows, because sometimes I want to qualify that was a really, really good question that I've never been asked before. That is the first thought. The first tip is figure out what your safety net of transition is. When you ask a question and somebody answers it, do you have the ability to freestyle off of that and then go to your next question? I call it pulling the string, because the string is the first question you ask, and then you get an answer, and there usually is an opportunity to pull the string a little bit more. And then you can usually pull the string a little bit more. I was on a podcast today that the host did a really good job of this. They asked about my story, and they asked about what it was like in the beginning when I was super broke and I couldn't pay my bills. And she transitioned and then asked a question deeper in that string pull. So she said, can I dig into more about what it was like when you were blank, blank, blank? Now, there also were a couple times where she said, I love that. That's the reason I wanted to do this episode, because I used to do that too. So I'm not making that wrong. I'm not shaming this person. I'm not shaming you. Trust me, I have done it more than you have, most likely, because at the time where we transitioned to doing solo episodes, my co-host Alan and I, we had interviewed, I don't know, 120 people, maybe 150. I don't even know how many. So I had a lot of opportunities to use that. That's why the earlier you can become aware of what your transitional words are, what your phrases are, what your safety net is, the better off you're going to be. The second one is something I just started doing yesterday with a client. I don't know where it came from. It just popped into my head, and it worked really, really well on this coaching call I was on. If you notice, I pause a lot. I take a lot of really, really long, maybe uncomfortable pauses. I don't know. I'm very used to it. The reason I pause so heavily is because I'm trying to avoid using the word I don't want to say boom, because that's just another filler. So I had a client do this last night. He uses a lot. And I said, every time you use the word and you catch yourself, I want you to say pickle out loud. Just say pickle. And he said, why? And I said, because when you start saying pickle out loud, you're going to catch yourself saying way more. At the end of the day, for most of us, and this was definitely the case for me, is just a space filler, and we're trying to save ourselves from the discomfort of assuming people don't know, or assuming people think that we don't know what we want to say next. It's a mouthful. Rather than sitting in silence or holding a long pause, we say, and then we answer. When in reality, the is not doing anything. All it's really doing is buying time. Or it's creating noise so you feel comfortable. So the person doesn't think you don't have an answer. Imagine every time you say you have to say pickle after. You're going to become very, very, very aware of when you're saying And we all have these unconscious things that we say. Alan right now is working through, So he'll say, I was at the gym the other day, and that's just a suggestion of lack of certainty. Or you want to go deeper into whatever it is you're talking about, but maybe you don't think it would be valuable, or you don't know what to say. So instead of saying, I was at the gym the other day and it was very hot. And if you've ever been in a hot gym, it's a challenge to work out, or it's more challenging to work out. Somebody might say, I was at the gym the other day and it was hot, and then they move on to the next point. A lot of this is unconscious. A lot of us do not even know we're doing it, to the point where when I was on Zoom with my client last night, there were several times where he said but he didn't even catch himself doing it, and I had to say pickle, 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 pickle. By the end of the call, he was very, very familiar with how often he said it. And it was usually in between two thoughts. So there was point A and a long and then point B. That was pretty much how it went for him. This is a challenge for sure. One of the tactics that has worked really well for me is doing a 1-minute video on your story every day. Instagram, Facebook story. I don't know if TikTok has stories. I don't use TikTok, but Instagram story, Facebook story. All you do is jump on and tell a 1-minute story and be very, very, very conscious of what you're saying. And if you say you can always delete it and do it again. And if you catch yourself using your crutches, whatever they are, you can do it again. Right now, I think my crutch is, and this is mostly in speaking, because I've given a good amount of speeches, but not nearly as many speeches as podcast episodes. I will get to the end of a thought and I'll wrap it up with something like, and it's one of the most important things for you to do. So we might be talking about communication and relationships. And I'll say a bunch of points, and I'll say this, and I'll say this, and I'll tell a story, blah, blah, blah. And when I get to the end, and I can tell I'm tracking off and I'm running out of things, I will wrap it up with, and it's honestly one of the most important things you can do. That right now is a crutch for me. I don't think I do that a ton on the podcast. I definitely do it more in speeches. But understanding what your crutches are is one of the most important things you can do. There it is, right? That is it in real time. But it is one of the most important things you can do as a speaker, because if we want to get a little bit better at speaking every day, every episode, every speech, every coaching call, every social media post, whatever it is, we have to practice the things that are holding us back from improving. So that's one thing I would suggest, doing a 1-minute video on social media every single day, because you get 365 opportunities a year to do it. It's a good way to build reps. This is not my tactic. This next one, I have to give credit to One of my friends, Eddie Panero, he is a YouTuber and a podcaster as well. He has a big channel called Your World Within. Great speaker. He's a world-class speaker.
What's going on, guys? My name is Austin, and I've been working with Kevin for a few months now. If there's one thing that I find super valuable is his expertise on how to position the podcast to the right audience and fit the content into the overall business plan. And frankly, when we work together, he challenges me a lot. There were some tough conversations that he initiated with me so that I can really grow in the business. Besides the coaching part, the editing team does amazing work with editing and show notes and staying on top of all communications. Overall, my experience working with Kevin has really been top-notch.
One of the habits that he has is he will go on to Google and he will go on to a random word generator and he will click on the button. It'll send him a random word and he'll do a minute speech on that. The goal behind this is to improve your ability to freestyle off of something. So just as an example, let's just do it. We'll do it. I think that would be the best way to actually experience this. So let me type in a random word generator. Oh my God, I just knocked my water on the floor. And we'll see. All right. Overview. That's a tough word. Overview. Okay. So the thought behind this is you want to do a 1-minute video or a 1-minute audio or just a 1-minute freestyle to yourself. So the word is overview. When I was younger, I really, really struggled to learn. I remember there were times in my life where I would go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and the instructor would give an overview of what we were going to learn that day. And it was almost the second they finished the sentence, I completely forgot what it was. I can look at an overview of a book and it says, you're going to learn this and this and this and this. And that does not stick with me very long. I have always been more of a physical learner than somebody who can look at categories and figure out what I'm actually supposed to learn. If you find yourself in a similar arena, if you find yourself in a similar skill set, it would probably benefit you to do more hands-on work because that would probably teach you more things at a deeper level, right? That's just an example. One of the ones I do is, as an example for clients, is sidewalk. Sidewalk. Isn't it weird how a sidewalk gives us this true sense of safety, like it's separating us from the road when there really is nothing separating us from the road? I mean, a sidewalk is only, 5 inches tall? A car could easily come barreling over that. And isn't that how life is set up? We go through life every single day kind of living on a sidewalk where we don't think anything can get us. But there are so many things that are dangerous to us. There are so many negative things that could happen. I think a lot of us believe that we're living in safety when in reality, it could be our day, unfortunately. Again, just another example. So that is another habit I would challenge you to practice. If you want to become a better speaker, the best way to do it is to speak, obviously. And with speaking, we have to understand what our weak points are. So if it's using filler words, if it's using crutches, if it's forgetting what you're talking about, there are a lot of ways to combat those things. We can have bullet points if you forget what you're talking about. Listening back to your podcast episodes is one of the best ways to become a better speaker because in the moment, you don't really know how well you're doing. You're thinking of adding value or interviewing the guest or whatever it may be. When you review it, you can see it from a different perspective. And what I've found is usually one of two things will happen. One, I will be saying something in the episode and I'll be thinking to myself, wow, I really should say blank next. And then I'll say that. And that's a really good sign for me that I was very in flow and I knew what I was talking about. There are other times where I'll listen and say, ooh, I really should have said this, and then I actually said something completely different. That's a sign that maybe I wasn't as in flow as I needed to be. Maybe I was thinking about something else. Maybe I was trying to wrap the episode up, and I could have gone deeper for a couple minutes and then come back out. There's a lot of intricacies when it comes to that. So just a couple ideas here. One, every time you say throw a different word right after it. So pickle, it just catches you. It helps you catch yourself and become conscious of it. realistically, if you use the words like, if you're doing a lot of that when you're speaking, you're not moving people as much as you could without that. Because like, those things are just, they're masks for uncertainty. If you came up to me, say I was working at a restaurant, and you said, "What is the best dish here?" And I sat there and I said, what is the best dish? And eventually I said cheeseburger with fries. Versus if you came up to me and said, "Hey, what is the best dish here?" And I paused for a second and I said cheeseburger and fries, for sure. It's my favorite. Those are two different conversations, two different levels of confidence, two different levels of influence. You're probably going to go with the second person. So that's just an example of that. So pickle, every time you use the word that's one. The second thing is try to catch yourself more and more when it comes to your transitions. So if you ask somebody a question and they answer it, there's usually another place we can go with that question if we want to. If you don't want to continue down that path, try to think of a more creative, flexible way to transition. So you could say something that is completely not connected to what we just talked about, but I'm really interested in is this. Boom. As opposed to, I love that, complete different line of questioning. Again, it's a 1% improvement. It's not going to make or break you, but if you want to become the best podcaster, speaker, coach, all those things, a lot of that is going to come with speaking. The more you speak, the better you'll get, as long as you're consciously practicing. And then, as I said, last one, random word generator. If you do that one time a day, I can't take credit for that. That's Eddie Pinero. But if you do that one time a day for a minute, you don't have to put that on social. You don't have to record it. You can just do it by yourself. That is something I was doing for a while, and that was very helpful. It just allows you to get into the rhythm and figure out what is your speaking style. How do you speak naturally? Again, I did this with a client last night, and he crushed it. He did a really good job. He only said once, and it made a lot of sense what he said. It was very, very nicely connected. You never would have known that it was based on one word that came up from Google. So those are a couple things I would suggest starting to practice. I wish I started them earlier. I really do. We were at a speech last week, and it went really, really well, and I felt the best I've ever felt in terms of speaking and getting into flow and connecting things and freestyling things. But the connecting between questions, those are two things I definitely could have improved earlier on. And then last thing before we get out of here, depends on if you want to do this or not. This worked well for Alan and I. We used to have what we would call an jar. And every time we would say we would put $1 in the jar. Now, did we always do this? No. Did we do it for a long period of time? Not a super long period of time. But what it did was it created the consciousness that we were doing it. And I also have a co-host, and my co-host as a co-host. So we can kick back and forth and say, hey, just so you said 10 times in that episode. Or you said 10 times in that episode. That's one that I still do. Usually when I'm very passionate and I'm just going, I'll say, boom. Because I don't have the certainty of exactly what I'm trying to say yet. Well, another one for me is interesting. If somebody says something that I find genuinely interesting, for some reason I just say interesting, and then I say something. I am genuinely interested, and I think the reason I say that is because I'm unsure of how I actually feel about it, but I do feel interested by it. Again, I'm always thinking of stuff like this because I want to get better, and I want to share that with you, and I am far from perfect. I do think I'm a strong speaker, but I am closer to terrible than I am to perfect. So that's why we work on it every day. All right, so next week we're going to plan on doing Is Good Enough Ever Enough? Because I've been using that a lot with clients. Can I promise you we're going to do that? No, because I might have a coaching session with somebody and I might learn something or see something or recognize something for the first time, and I'm going to want to bring it to you because that's my goal. I want there to be a lot of different topics for this podcast. I don't want it just to be how to get more listens or how to get more views or, yeah, that's all great, but you becoming a better podcaster is going to help you more than any of that. I know a lot of people who have a lot of listens, but they are not making any money. I know a lot of people who have a lot of listens who cannot do a speech because they've never practiced. I want you to be a well-rounded podcaster, not just somebody who has a large TikTok following or whatever it may be. I want you to have the confidence to get on stage and give a speech or jump on an Instagram live and do it. Be on another podcast. Talk in front of a group of humans. I would love that for you. So is good enough ever enough? That's currently planned for next week, but we'll see what happens. That'll be episode number 60. As always, if you are interested in a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session, please click the link in the show notes. I have been doing a ton of them. I am super grateful for everyone who is booking. It's amazing. I get to learn so much about podcasting and I get to help people. That's what I want at the end of the day. I want to be the person that I needed when I was where you are. Maybe you're 5 episodes in. Maybe you haven't even started yet. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who listen because they're trying to build up the courage to actually get started. If that is you, let's hop on Zoom and I promise I will help you. Whether it's naming it, figuring out who your audience is, intro, outro, trailer, tech stuff, whatever it is, I got you. I appreciate you all. I hope you are crushing the podcast game. I hope you are feeling more confident. I hope your audience is growing. But most of all, I hope that you're getting better. Because if you're getting better, eventually everything can get better with you. Until next week, I'll talk to you soon.